Welcome to ITI's podcast. We call it Download on Tech. ITI is the global trade association of the technology industry, representing the world's technology innovators. When you listen to episodes of Download on Tech, you'll hear from leaders at the most innovative technology companies, from policymakers, and from influencers from around the world. Our guests share their perspective on the intersection of technology and public policy. Today, our special guest joining us is Microsoft's Lori Allen. Lori is a seasoned technology veteran with over 20 years of diverse experience, from consulting to global alliance management, product management, and leading development teams. Lori currently serves as a senior accessibility technology evangelist at Microsoft, where she works to create inclusive work environments and drive accessibility in products in order to empower individuals with disabilities. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jason. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Well, and it's a particularly timely day for us to be together. We're celebrating the 13th annual Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is celebrated every year on May 16th. And I want to ask you, in honor of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, for your thoughts on some key areas where the technology industry can really focus their efforts to promote accessibility and inclusion for individuals with disabilities.
Well, I'm sure you've heard the hullabaloo around something we call generative AI. It's all the rage these days. And while I am so excited to see what's happening already with generative AI and really excited about what's coming, I think it's important to not forget about or overlook or stop building on all of the accessible technology goodness that's been out there for a long time that many people rely on. But of course, coming around to generative AI, I think more than any other assistive technology that I've seen, this has the potential to really truly level the playing field for people with disabilities. So I'm so excited to see what innovations will come from this.
And it's a great reminder of the positive that technology can do and the positive that AI can do. And I know we're going to talk over the course of this show in a little bit more detail about the products and services that AI enables. But I'm glad you mentioned that as a way to kick off our conversation, because we are so often trapped by policymakers in a discussion of all the risks of AI. But it's great to focus on the positives. And I think for individuals with disabilities, AI is really a game changer. And I wanted to ask you about a recent Microsoft showcase of how technologies can impact and improve lives. And it's called the Microsoft Ability Summit, which concluded earlier this year. Can you share some key takeaways from that event in particular, and what the Microsoft Ability Summit is all about in terms of bridging the disability divide?
So it was our 14th annual Ability Summit, and it's an event where we bring together, our customers and our partners, policymakers, to talk about what's happening around the world with accessibility and disability inclusion. And it's just a great opportunity for us to showcase some of these great stories. We heard about the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, who is leveraging generative AI to provide descriptions for over 1 million pieces of art. I mean, that would be impossible to do manually, but generative AI makes it possible to build these rich descriptions and make art accessible for people who are blind or low vision. We work closely with the ALS community and with people with speech disabilities to help them continue to communicate using their own voice. You've heard computer-generated mechanical sounding voices, but with custom neural voice, it retains people's intonation and their tone and their personality so they can continue to communicate with their families and their friends in their own voice. We met Anton, who's a developer from Ukraine who has cerebral palsy. He has difficulty typing and he can't use speech-to-text technology, so he's using GitHub Copilot to significantly reduce the amount of code that he has to physically type. And then one other session that I found particularly interesting that's not even tech related was the work that goes into building accessibility into our physical spaces. I'm a wheelchair user, and so for me, I was really interested in and pleased to hear about all of the thought and effort that goes in to making not only our buildings accessible, but the space around our buildings accessible.
Really interesting. I can see, by the way, why you have the word evangelist in your title. You're so passionate about the advantages that technology can provide for accessibility. And sticking on the theme of the summit that you mentioned, I know this year's summit, every year's summit has a theme to it, and you had 3 themes this year that I wanted to ask you to expand on. Build, imagine, and include. So why were those the choices for the themes for this year's Ability Summit, and how do they reflect your current assessment of the landscape of
Mhm.
accessibility initiatives?
So we always want to talk about, what's been built. What have we and partners and customers, built for people with disabilities? What are we thinking about for the future? But how do we ensure that we are building inclusively? So I'll start when I think about build, I think about, especially right now as we're racing to get all of these AI products onto the market, it's more important than ever to be rigorous in building accessibility in from the beginning during the design phase of the product development lifecycle, and particularly because I think about the impact that these products can have on people with disabilities, perhaps even more so than people without disabilities. But we've got to be disciplined in building accessibility in from the beginning. And then as I think about Imagine, I think about some of the great work our partners are doing. I'll give you an example. Be My Eyes is this amazing app that pairs people who are blind or have low vision with sighted volunteers. Amazing tool. However, someone who's requesting assistance has to give up a little bit of their privacy to get help from a stranger. So Be My Eyes, now Be My AI, is leveraging computer vision to provide an AI assistant to provide an incredibly detailed description of whatever the camera is pointing at. So now, if I need assistance, I can opt for that Be My AI option, get assistance without giving up my privacy. But with all of these products that we're building, for them to be truly inclusive, we've got to continually work on bringing the voice of disability into the large language models that support them, to shrink that data desert that we know exists today, where the voice of disability is not represented as well as it could be. So we'll need to continue to do that. And also, we'll be on this continuous journey to train bias out of these models.
And as part of that journey, I know you're very focused on making sure that policymakers and those in the business community understand that the use cases of AI for people in the disabilities community are just so important to their lives. The Be My Eyes example is a terrific one. So I want to circle back to AI, and you referenced it, and the need to educate about the difference that AI can make in the lives of people with disabilities. So AI, of course, is a hot topic in the technology industry, but it's a hot topic in all industries. And obviously, Microsoft has been at the center of the discussion of AI and deploying innovative AI solutions. One of the big solutions that's coming to market is Microsoft Copilot. And we hear a lot about Copilot's use in office environments and making businesses more efficient and opening up new opportunities. We don't hear enough about the impact that Microsoft Copilot and other AI technologies that Microsoft is deploying will have for people with disabilities. So I want to
Mhm.
ask you to be an evangelist for the impact of Microsoft Copilot and other AI technologies and tools, and perhaps walk us through a little bit of what Microsoft showed off at the summit and the impact it's going to have on people's lives.
Sure. So let me start with just Copilot, how Copilot benefits everybody, and then I'll dig in a little deeper for specifically how it helps people with disabilities. So Copilot is magic, absolute magic. You can search across all of your data. For example, you can search across your emails, Teams chats, documents, to find things like I can say, hey, Copilot, find any communications I've had with Jason Oxman about ITI, and it's going to pull up any chats we've had, emails we've exchanged, any documents we've shared. We can create first drafts of documents. We can create PowerPoint presentations referencing one or multiple files. We can conduct really in-depth analysis in Excel just using natural language commands. You can summarize meeting notes and get action items coming out of a Teams call. You can use GitHub to write code using natural language commands. I've written LinkedIn recommendations merely by referencing someone's LinkedIn profile. So those are just some general ways that we can all leverage it. But specifically when we think about people who have disabilities, one of the things we did, our accessibility team got early access to Copilot so that we could test it. And so along the way, we started documenting our use cases. I've got colleagues who are dyslexic who have difficulty getting started creating the first draft of a document, first draft of an email. So they'll leverage Copilot to create those first drafts. I've got a colleague who's blind who said that for the first time, he was able to create a beautiful PowerPoint presentation without assistance. I've got another colleague who's blind. If someone sends her content like a Word document that's not accessible, she'll ask Copilot to summarize the document, and then it is accessible and she can consume it leveraging her screen reader. I've got a colleague who's autistic who would tell you that when he writes an email, it can sometimes come across as sounding a little bit harsh. So he uses Copilot to soften the tone of his email. Um, Colleagues who are ADHD are using it to summarize Teams chats that they've been mentioned in. I've got a mobility disability. I don't have hand function, so I can't physically type on a traditional keyboard. I would sit in a meeting and I'd have to try to remember what was said and what the action items were, and then find time to create those notes using speech to text after the meeting. Meeting recap in Teams is an absolute game changer for me. Now I know I can rely on Copilot to capture those meeting notes and create those action items. Huge, huge time saver. But even moving beyond Copilot, we've got a new feature coming out called Accessibility Assistant. So today, of course, we all run Accessibility Checker before we send out a Word document, but we have to remember to do that after we've created the content. We're bringing Accessibility Checker to the forefront during content creation. So it'll work similarly to how spell check works today. As I'm creating my content, if I introduce an accessibility issue, it's going to pop up an icon. For example, if I type yellow font on a white background, it's going to trigger a color contrast issue. I can click on the icon. It's going to tell me what my issue is, in this case, a color contrast issue. It will bring up a complementary color palette of high contrast colors for me to select from. I can simply click on the color I choose, and it will apply to my text and resolve that accessibility issue. And then we're also expanding Azure AI for accessibility to add visual descriptions or audio descriptions for videos for people who are blind or have low vision.
This is an amazing list of things, many of which I've never even thought of, and that's because I don't live in the disabilities community, so I don't know and I'm not aware of these. And you are playing an incredible role in educating about the amazing impact that AI will have on people's lives through these products. And I want to stay on this topic of AI's impact and maybe dive in a little deeper. You've talked about a lot of Microsoft tools. But we know that if we broaden our aperture and look globally, the impact that AI is going to have on individuals with disabilities around the world, and the ability of AI to really advance accessibility around the world is truly remarkable. So I wanted to ask you to share with us some additional thoughts you have as we look globally on AI's impact, how accessible technology is really going to help empower individuals in the ways you're describing.
I think people with disabilities have always been early adopters of technology because, again, I think, in a lot of ways it benefits us more than it benefits people without disabilities. And so, I look forward to more and more companies leveraging things like custom neural voices and computer vision, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And so many organizations have large language models that are building this technology. It's not just Microsoft. And I think by bringing that voice of disability in, we're going to find ways that we haven't even thought of to make things accessible. And even things like we've got a partner called Signly. They provide sign language interpretation for web content. And so if you think about it, If I've been deaf since birth, I've never spoken English, I've never heard English. It is not my first language. My first language is sign language. And so we need that representation for people who are deaf and sign language users. Not really AI, but really interesting technology that is not difficult to do. So I look forward to that becoming more mainstream than it is today.
When we think about the technology industry itself and the creators, the developers, the engineers that are out there creating technology products, and today very focused on AI, and trying to figure out how AI can be used in ways that are beneficial to all end users. I want to ask you to kind of flag for us some of the issues and opportunities that you see, and this can be the case for Microsoft, but I really think it's an issue for all technology
Hmm.
companies to be aware of. What are some of the issues and opportunities that AI
Hmm.
presents in the tech industry for those creators, developers, and engineers that are trying to incorporate accessibility into their products?
Mm. Well, again, I think it comes back to that discipline. Really, we're racing at the speed of light right now. We've got so much pressure to get things to market so fast because we want to beat the competition. And I think it's critical that we are disciplined in building accessibly. Because as I mentioned, I think these products can have such an impact on people with disabilities. But if we don't get it right from the beginning, and we don't build them to be inclusive, we are going to really exclude people with disabilities. And I think the opportunity is this technology enables us to build so much faster than traditional features or products that we might be building. So I think there's the opportunity to really, really move quickly when leveraging generative AI to build. And as we know that when we build with and for the disability community, everyone benefits. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm thinking about closed captions. It was built for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but today, 50% of Americans watch television with captions on. And if you look at just Gen Z, if you isolate Gen Z, that number goes up to about 80%. And then I think about, speech to text technology built for people like me with a mobility disability, but who doesn't use that when they're interacting with their cell phone? So I think, again, we're going to, I think we're going to see innovations that we haven't even dreamed of in the next year.
Two great examples, and I am users of both those technologies, and benefit from both those technologies. Closed captioning, particularly when I'm watching programs that may have originated internationally and
Mhm.
having trouble tracking some accents,
Right.
and when I'm on the move with my mobile device, using that speech to text capability is something that's enormously beneficial. What a great reminder that products created for accessibility purposes can also have broader use. And I wanted to ask you, Lori, because you're so focused on thought leadership in the technology and accessibility communities, I wanted to ask you to leave us with your thoughts on how technology industry leaders and even individuals who are not leaders, but individual contributors within the technology industry can help maybe accelerate their accessibility journey.
Mhm.
And if people are looking to find out more information and find out how they can be better contributors to that journey, what resources are available that you would point people to for support and guidance and education on all these important issues?
I think any journey starts with education, and particularly this journey. Often I think people avoid conversations about accessibility because they don't want to talk about disability because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. So the more we educate ourselves, the more comfortable and confident we are in having these conversations. But as organizations are getting started, I think it's really important to have an executive sponsor to champion the accessibility initiatives across the organization. And then you need to think about how do we build an inclusive environment for your employees with disabilities. You can leverage tools that are available in the products that you already own. They're there. It's just people aren't aware of them, and that helps build that inclusive environment for your employees. Build up your disability ERG. Create an accommodation process for people to get the support and the tools that they need to be productive. And by doing all of these things, you then open up the talent pool that you can recruit from, and you can bring that voice of disability into your organization to build an even more diverse workforce. And then you can start thinking about intentional programs like creating a neurodiversity hiring program. And now once you've built this inclusive environment, then it's time to start looking at your broader organization. Are your intranet sites accessible for your employees? Can your employees who are blind access and read their pay stubs? Are you building accessibility into your own products and services for your customers? And here is where it's really important to not make assumptions about what people with disabilities need. We build with the community, not for the community. For example, I know what it's like to rely on speech to text technology. I don't know what it's like to rely completely on a screen reader. But because you've built this inclusive environment and you've recruited in people with disabilities, now you've got that lived in experience to bring into your own product making. And also, it's really important to make your products accessible because people with disabilities, in working age people with disabilities, have a disposable income of $490 billion. That's not a market you want to exclude from being able to purchase your products. And now you're really on a roll. So now it's time to start thinking about how to innovate. What can you build for the disability community? And I'll give you a couple of examples. Estee Lauder recently published an app to help people who are blind or have low vision apply makeup confidently. Shell created an app for people with mobility disabilities. So when I pull into a gas station, I can open up my app and request assistance putting gas in my car. I can tell you as a wheelchair user that will certainly influence where I purchase gas. And then shifting gears a little bit to what resources are available. And of course, coming from Microsoft, I'll tell you what we provide. But we have a really great training that we actually just refreshed called Accessibility Fundamentals. And it covers all of those things like what is disability? What is accessibility? Why is it important? And how do I build inclusively? We've got several LinkedIn learning courses. One is about how do I bring accessibility or build an inclusive workforce. We've got lots and lots of playbooks and toolkits that we make available because we want others to learn from the lessons that we've learned rather than having to start from the beginning. We also make public our accessibility evolution framework model, which is how we measure accessibility as a business, because if we can't track and measure, we can't continue to improve on our own journey. But there are great organizations like Disability In who have a ton of resources available. Department of Labor has great information about employees with disabilities. And then we're seeing great thought leadership coming out of other sectors like JP Morgan Chase and EY. EY has an amazing Center for Neurodiversity within their practice. But we've got a lot of resources available at Microsoft.com/accessibility. So you'll find a lot of really great information there.
And that's really great information that you've just provided, and a great reminder. You talked about the spending power of the community of individuals with disabilities, but it's also a great reminder that there are literally tens of millions of our fellow employees, fellow Americans, hundreds of millions, billions of people around the world in this disabilities community. Many of them we know and work with, and many of them we don't know. And the tools that you're building are helping reach everyone. And the education you're providing, including to us here today, is a great way for us to accelerate our own accessibility journey and be part of the solution. And I'm grateful to you for taking the time to walk us through your own personal experience and the work that you're doing on behalf of Microsoft. It was a true honor to have you here today, Lori. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your perspective, your experience, and your own journey on accessibility with us today.
Thanks so much, Jason. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today.
Our guest today has been Lori Allen, who is Senior Accessibility Technology Evangelist at Microsoft. Our thanks to Lori, and our thanks to you for joining us for ITI's Download on Tech podcast. You can find future episodes of Download on Tech wherever you enjoy podcasts or on our website at itic.org. I'm Jason Oxman, ITI's President and CEO, and I can't wait to connect with you next time.